请解除待命，相互检查。
We're in China. Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. On today's podcast, we are off to Shanghai, China, and we are taking you with us with our portable recorder. And our trip to Shanghai was really not planned at all. We had no intentions of going to China. We were in Macau and made the decision to leave Macau a little bit earlier than we had originally planned. And we couldn't enter Thailand quite yet because we only had 30 days there, and we already had a booking for an Airbnb for 28 of those. So we began looking at other places we could go. And although we don't have Chinese visas, which is something that's necessary for Canadians, we were able to enter China or Shanghai specifically on the 144-hour transit visa.
So various cities in China have different rules and time allotments for people who can visit without actually having a visa. So for Beijing, it's 72 hours. For Shanghai, it's 144. For Shenzhen and Zhuhai, it's 20%. I think it's 72 as well. Yeah, and Shanghai is actually coupled with a couple other cities. So the way it works is you book a flight in. When you get there, you go to a line for the 144-hour visa, which is conveniently by far the longest line in the place. And then once you're there, you can go between any of these three cities. I can't remember which ones they are. And then get a flight out anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, so we did quite a bit of research into it before we decided to actually go. And one of the main criteria is that it has to be a flight from one country and then moving on to a third country. So you can't just go, Macau, Shanghai, Macau. You have to be going to a third country. So we were going Macau, Shanghai, Thailand. And so we arrived at the Macau airport, excited to start our experience in Shanghai. And the lady went to check us in, looked and saw that we had no visas, and then said, "Oh, I can't let you on the plane." We're like, why not? We've got the third country. We're entering on the 144-hour transit visa. We're only there for 5 days. We're actually there for less than 144 hours. And what I had missed in my research was that you actually can't have any connections in and out of China. So our flight out of Shanghai connected through Kunming, which is also a Chinese city. And because of that, it basically made the 144-hour transit visa rule void because you only get 24 hours if you're connecting through another city. So all very complicated. And we had this sort of slightly panicked moment where we had to hop on the phone with the company that we'd booked our airline through or booked our flight through and get some assistance in trying to figure out our flight. So luckily we were able to change our flight so that we flew directly from Shanghai to Bangkok. And, $300 later, we were able to board our flight to Shanghai.
And the flight from Macau to Shanghai is actually not long at all. When you get into Shanghai, it takes a while to get through immigration for the 144-hour visa. And then the airport is a little bit outside of the city center. One interesting thing about Shanghai is they've built a high-speed magnetic levitating train. It's called the maglev, and you can take it from the airport to a normal metro station that's fairly close to the downtown. You still have to take the metro for a while. And the maglev, I can't remember exactly how much it costs. It's not terribly expensive. And in 7 minutes, you go from the airport almost all the way into the city, and you get up to over 300 kilometers per hour on that train.
Yeah, about 302 kilometers an hour, I think was the max that we got to. It's just crazy. You're just whipping by things, but it feels pretty safe when you're on it. It was definitely an exciting adventure for us.
Yeah, it was fun. But by the time we got into the city, got to our hostel, and got to bed, it was late and it had been a long day.
Yeah, so we check in with you on our first official day in Shanghai as we set out to explore. So we are currently on the streets of Shanghai, And it is quite chilly here at the moment. It's definitely the coldest place we've been since leaving Canada. The weather said it's only 11 degrees, but it feels like a very brisk 11 degrees. So over the last couple weeks, we've been like, oh, our bags are so full. They're so heavy. Like, why do we have these jackets we haven't used? And I'm feeling extremely grateful that I've been carting around a jean jacket and a rain jacket and a couple sweaters and long sleeves because it is quite brisk here.
Today is really like our first impression of the city. You walk outside, really cold. like I did not imagine Shanghai being this cold, but it is pretty north, so it makes sense. Gray, smoggy, but then just a ton of really cool skyscrapers around. So, yeah, it looks like a big modern city, so we're excited to check it out and see what else has to offer. We're here for 5 days. We've got to catch up on some work stuff, so we're not going to be exploring for full 5 days. And we don't have too much like research done, so there's not a big list of stuff to do, but we're going to kind of document what we do get up to here and let you guys in on the adventure and see what else happens.
So we have made our way down to the Bund in Shanghai, which is a really famous area, a really popular area, because on the one side there's a ton of really cool buildings, and then across the river there's all these really spectacular big buildings in the financial district, one of which is the Oriental Pearl, which is a building that many of you may have seen photographed before. It's kind of a couple big balls with a small ball on top, and it's pink right now. But
very good descriptive language.
How would you describe the Oriental Pearl?
It looks like a sword with Christmas ornaments stuck on it.
Oh, that's actually quite descriptive. Yeah, we'll post a photo in the show notes, obviously, but it's pink right now, but it actually changes colors and lights up at night. So we're excited to see the skyline at night. Right now it's just like a gray, overcast, cold day. Something that's really interesting that we're noticing, not on the financial district side, but on the side that seems to have a lot of hotels and shops, is that they all have Chinese flags. So that's kind of an interesting thing that we've observed, but it's just crazy busy down here. You can probably hear the noise in the background. It's a ton of tourists and people out and about just taking in the beautiful skyline of Shanghai. So we've made our way down here after getting some food, and we'll check in a little bit later.
So the Bund area is one of the most popular tourist spots in Shanghai. Like Amanda said in that last check-in, there is the amazing old colonial strip of buildings where every building is adorned with a whole bunch of Chinese flags. And then opposite that, it's actually kind of funny because you look in old photos and that area was a major tourist destination purely because of the old buildings on the Bund side. But now everyone there is staring across the river at all the gigantic skyscrapers. So we were there. We were eager to see the view at night, and we went for dinner just off the Bund because there's quite a few good restaurants around.
Yeah, so we went to a Burmese Chinese fusion restaurant called Lost Heaven. It was a little bit pricey, but definitely within the realm of possibility for our budget. Something that I would definitely recommend if you're in the Bund area. It was really, really delicious food and a really cool atmosphere.
Yeah, it was cool. The restaurant is extremely dark. It was the type of place you would do nefarious business if you were a spy.
Yeah, we weren't really engaging with that, but that's okay. And so we went for dinner, and then we came back out, and the sun had set by that point. So we made our way back to the Bund to be able to see the skyline at night. And the reason why we did that is that all the buildings really come alive with lights at night, particularly the Oriental Pearl turns pink and then flashes different colors. A lot of the buildings have different sort of images or words lit up on them, and it's just a really, really spectacular skyline to see at night.
Mm-hmm. And so we were staying in an area right by People's Park, which is very central, a popular area for malls, hotels, everything. And that was about a 30-minute walk from the Bund. And getting around Shanghai wasn't overly difficult, but definitely wasn't easy. Shanghai and China in general, Uber has recently left, so their Chinese competitor Didi, which actually purchased Uber China. We didn't bother getting ourselves set up on there. I don't even know if it's possible as a foreigner. So we didn't have that option. We didn't have much luck trying to hail taxis. I don't know if it's just they don't want to take foreigners because a lot of people because they don't speak English, but trying to flag down taxis was a pain. And then the metro, it's good if you're going exactly where it's going, but there's a lot of kind of dead areas of the city where we would look up on the map and see, oh, it's a 45-minute walk. Oh, it's a 45-minute metro ride. So we did a lot of walking. And after that evening out at the Bund, checking out the skyline at night, we walked back to our hotel.
Yeah, and we check in with you on day 2 in Shanghai. We woke up this morning to a really cold day. It's about 7 degrees Celsius right now. It's been raining for most of the day. Definitely like a hot chocolate in bed day. But instead we decided to go out and explore a little bit. We went to a great brunch spot called Egg where we got a good Western sort of brunch, I guess, and then made our way over to the Propaganda Art Center. What did you think of the Propaganda Art Center, Rai?
So it's kind of interesting when you walk over. It's in this random old hotel or apartment building called the President Mansion. So you walk into the complex, go into building number C or something like that, and walk down to the basement. And in the basement, divided amongst 2 apartments, are all these old propaganda posters from 50s, 60s, 70s communist China. It's an interesting place to go check out. You learn a little bit of the history, see kind of some of the propaganda that the Communist Party was putting out at that time, and the targets of the propaganda. Obviously, the U.S. Is the main target for all of it. So it's a cool place to check out. Overall, Shanghai, very, very modern, very first world city. But it's been fun to be somewhere where you feel maybe a bit more out of our element than other places, because everywhere we've been so far, English has kind of been so prevalent. Shanghai definitely is as well. We haven't had too many problems, but there's Chinese culture is bigger than English culture. So
yeah, and we went to the M&M store last night because we discovered peanut butter M&Ms while we were in Macau, which are amazing. And so we're like, oh, the M&M store probably has them. And we walk in and none of the M&Ms were in English. So it was really hard to pick out what we wanted. And that's kind of been a thing here. Just looking around the streets, I don't really see much English on the signs. Thankfully, I have Google Translate on my phone so I can hold it up to signs and translate it. That obviously only works when my VPN is working because Google is blocked here. For anyone who's traveling here who still wants kind of the comforts of home, a VPN is definitely something I would say to purchase beforehand. And having a SIM card in Shanghai has been pretty helpful because the Wi-Fi is fairly atrocious in most places that we've been so far. But yeah, like Ryan said, it's been really cool to be in a place that is a little bit more outside of our comfort zone. Although we're headed to a Mexican restaurant at the moment to, try and feel like we're more at home because that's our favorite cuisine. So we'll check in a little bit later. So we sort of touched on this in the last clip, but something that we both had for our computers and our phones before we went to China was a VPN. And what a VPN does is it allows you to reroute your IP address to somewhere else. So in China, a lot of the things that we use in almost every other country in the world, such as Facebook, Google, Gmail, Uber, all of those things are blocked in China. China has their own versions of them, but we're not connected with those. So having a VPN was really nice so that we were still able to share photos and stories on Instagram, still able to do our podcast through Facebook. We were still able to check our email the 5 days that we were gone. And So, I mean, if you want to completely disconnect on your trip to China, you definitely don't need a VPN. But for us, it was important to still be able to check emails and be able to do some work. So we connected ourselves with a VPN before we got to China. And that was really helpful, just being able to continue to use the things that we use day to day on the internet.
Yeah, because it's so sporadic. Like Google Maps, for example, is blocked. And so that's like such a crucial app on your phone. And then you're left in like the dark ages with Apple Maps. Your VPN's disconnected. Or heaven forbid, searching on Yahoo.
So ghetto.
Yeah, it's crazy. I would definitely say get one before you go, because you never know if you're going to want, like, even if you're like, oh, I'm going for a weekend, I don't need to have this. It's like a trip to the woods. I would definitely get one beforehand, because if you are there, it's much, much harder to get access to a VPN.
Yeah, definitely. And then another thing that we just wanted to touch on was Chinese food is really difficult for me to eat because I'm gluten-free and mostly vegetarian. So I wasn't really that excited to see some of the local food, which oftentimes was like a full chicken or goose or something with the head and everything kind of just hanging in a window. And then they would pull it off and like chop it up for you. And definitely not my thing. So we were trying to find some other different types of cuisine within China. And it's always kind of a tough thing because it's really important to me to try and taste some of the local food and really understand what the local food is like in that country, because Chinese food is quite different in China as opposed to, the Chinese food that we eat in Canada or the US. We didn't really end up eating that much authentic Chinese food though, just because most of it was pretty heavily meat or gluten based.
I mean, I think it's like maybe not like anything, but there is definitely a balance there, right? Like you want to get out of your comfort zone and try new things because you never know what you're going to like. But then also you want to stay comfortable and you're kind of drawn to things you do enjoy already. So it's hard to find a balance. And I think that sometimes we could be better about pushing ourselves into the try new things section.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a couple years ago when we first were traveling, for the first time, I think that I was a lot more inquisitive and curious about new cuisines. But after just getting sick numerous times across the world, I'm a little bit more hesitant. And I'm also a little bit more like, I can look at a place and kind of be like, that's like the type of place that has like a 50-50 chance of giving me diarrhea. Or that's a place that has like a 95% chance of giving me diarrhea. And it's important to me to have solid stools. So, we saw a lot of steamboat places.
That's actually how we rate restaurants now.
Based on the stool? The stool laughter?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the percentage chance of diarrhea.
Oh. Yeah, there's a lot of steamboat restaurants in Shanghai.
What's a steamboat restaurant? So
a steamboat is kind of like a big pot full of soup, and you cook your ingredients. So you choose what you want.
Kind of like a hot pot.
Yeah, and you cook them in a brothy soup. And I mean, sounds great and everything, but we saw a bunch that were washing their dishes out on the street with hoses, and that to me is like 110% chance of diarrhea, and I am not eating there. So those are just, things I consider when we choose a restaurant that we want to eat at, just after years of travel and being sick in multiple places around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the rest of day 2 and even most of day 3 was spent just relaxing, hanging out, kind of exploring the People's Square area and getting some work done. And something that's really amazing about Shanghai is that it has a really, really great restaurant scene. So if you're like us and you maybe don't want to eat local Chinese food off the street because your stomach is sensitive, there's still a lot of great places to eat. We were continuously finding amazing restaurants that we were excited to try.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so we check in with you from one of those amazing restaurants at the start of day 4. So we are currently at a restaurant called Green and Safe in Shanghai. It's in a really neat area where there's a bunch of brick buildings and some cool restaurants and bars and pedestrian walkway kind of in between them. So it feels kind of like a little village. It definitely doesn't feel like we're in China in this sort of area. I mean, if you plop me down in this restaurant, I would have probably no idea where in the world I was. It's a bakery. They have salad options. They're selling some gourmet foods. We're eating chips and guacamole, so, as usual. And so today is day 4 in Shanghai. How are you feeling about Shanghai so far?
It's been good. So we spent our whole day yesterday working, didn't really do much sightseeing. We've been staying in an area that's called it's right by People's Square, so the area is kind of called People's Square. Pretty central spot, so there's a lot of stuff to do around here. But we haven't done too much in the last 36 hours. So this afternoon we're hoping to get out and see a few more sites. We have a flight tomorrow night, so we've got probably 36 hours left in the city. But yeah, it's been good so far. I didn't really have any expectations going in, so it's met my non-existent expectations.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been a bit of a struggle is not having that much stuff to do, but then having all this work to do, but then having the Wi-Fi not be very good. So it's definitely been something that I've been struggling with. It's one thing to have a private room and to not have a rush to go see and do all this stuff, but then to not really have that rush and then to not have the Wi-Fi work and not be able to do things we need to do is a little bit challenging. But I think that that's one of the things that just comes with traveling. You can't always expect to have good internet anywhere in the world, and I think that it's good that we're kind of working through that and learning the frustrations of that now.
Yeah, and I think going in we had booked this room which had a desk in it, and I was at least pretty excited about the possibility of being able to work and just hang out there and get stuff done. But yeah, the internet at the place hasn't really worked at all, so our times at the hotel have been slightly unproductive. And then when we've gone out, it's been an issue. So, yeah, overall, though, it's been cool experiencing some colder temperatures. I feel like it's going to make me appreciate Chiang Mai and the warm Thai weather a lot more. And it's just it's a fun little break to be so warm and tropical and then pop up and we're oh, this is almost like Canada. And then pop out again 5 days later and be okay, back to the warm weather. So, yeah, we've got about 36 hours left. We're going to go tour around the city a bit more, hopefully get up to one of the building viewpoints here, get a view of the skyline, eat some more food, try not to go broke.
So going to the top of one of the big buildings in the Shanghai Financial Center was something that we really wanted to do. So we did a little bit of research as to which was the best viewpoint, which was the best building to go up, and we decided on the Shanghai World Financial Center building. And the building looks a little bit like a bottle opener from the outside. It's got sort of this massive square hole in the middle of the top, sort of 6 floors, I think it is. And you go up to the 100th floor to reach the viewpoint, and it's crazy being up that high, and you can look down and see the big break in between where kind of the bottle opening is and see the glass below you, which is pretty trippy. Yeah, very trippy. When you can see people down in that, I think it was the 96th floor was the one right on the bottom of that hole, and then you're on the 101st or 100th. But yeah, you have a very good view of the city from there, both directions, and you can see the Oriental Pearl. You can see a bit of the Shanghai Tower. I think it's a really good spot to go. But just in general, going up one of the buildings, I feel like that's something you got to do when you're in Shanghai. Yeah, for sure. And so we check in with you from the top of the 100th floor of the Shanghai World Financial Center. We have arrived on the 100th floor of the Shanghai World Financial Center. So we are 100 stories above Shanghai, and it's pretty unreal from up here. We can see, city as far as the eyes can reach. Other big buildings in the distance. We have a good view of the Oriental Pearl, the Shanghai Tower, which is taller than the tower that we're on right now. It's just pretty amazing to be up this high. I think this is the highest tower I've ever been in. Is this the highest tower you've ever been in?
One World Trade is actually taller than this.
Oh, is it? Okay. Second highest tower that I think I've ever been in then. And this is the second highest tower in Shanghai. The Shanghai Tower is higher.
Yeah, and the 5th tallest building in the world.
Yeah, so we're pretty up there right now. And I mean, this is a really cool city to get high in. Get high into the clouds. And I mean, we can see planes in the distance in the sky, probably getting ready to land in Shanghai. Can see like the building that's close to where we're staying a little ways away. Can see the traffic on the highway. You can see just everything that's going on in the city right now. So it's pretty cool. So we're going to explore a little bit, and we'll definitely post some photos if we can get some in the show notes. It is hard to get because of the reflection. It is nighttime now. We're going to try and get some good stuff, some good footage.
So our night at the World Financial Center was our last night in Shanghai. We had most of the next day and didn't want to stray too far from our area of the city after we checked out of the hotel. So we went to the U Garden, which is one of the top attractions in Shanghai, and we do a check-in from there.
So we are partway through our final day in Shanghai right now. And we don't have a full day here because our flight is at 9 tonight, but we do have most of the day. And so we started the day off by checking out of our hostel and then making our way to the U Garden. And I kind of imagined the U Garden being a super chill, just like really relaxing place to hang out, but it's actually like crazy busy there. The garden itself is really nice though, but there's a whole area around it with a couple temples and a bunch of shops, and I'm sure you can hear all the noise in the background with cars and people and announcements and all that sort of thing. So it's actually been pretty overwhelming, but I do think the garden was worth it. What did you think?
Yeah, it's a good, nice little peaceful spot. Definitely worth checking out when you're here. The area surrounding it is crazy too, and very like Chinese vibe, so it's a fun place to check out.
Chinese vibe?
Chinese vibe.
Unlike the rest of Shanghai?
Also Chinese vibe.
Do you mean sort of like, just to clarify for listeners, like there's sort
traditional.
of
Traditional, yeah. There's a lot of like buildings that are traditional, and then there's just a lot of people around.
Right, so there's a lot of like pagodas and temples and shops with the traditional Chinese lanterns, and it's really interesting being in this area that seems really old and looking around and seeing something like the Shanghai Tower, which is one of the tallest buildings in the world, and just like an absurdly modern building, and just seeing the differentiation between like older China and newer China. And so we're not sure what we're going to do with the rest of our day, but we're going to continue our adventure, and we'll check in a little bit later. So once we had finished up at the U Garden, we made our way back to the People's Park area where our bags were still at our hostel. We had one final meal in Shanghai before collecting our stuff and making our way to the airport. And even though our flight wasn't till 9 p.m., we had to be there a couple hours early, and it takes about an hour to get from the CBD of Shanghai back to the airport. It's quite a ways, even with the maglev train, which goes 300 kilometers an hour. So we gave ourselves quite a bit of time just in case there was anything that went wrong with immigration or anything like that. Since we had a little bit of a hassle getting into the country, we wanted to get out quite smoothly. And we ended up making it to the airport with plenty of time. Everything went smoothly through security and customs, and we got one final meal in the airport before making our way off to Thailand. And so overall, what was sort of the highlights and lowlights of the time in Shanghai for you?
Well, I think I said it a couple of times during the episode, but I went in without much in the way of expectations. This was really a weekend that was kind of like a let's just go somewhere kind of weekend. And so Shanghai was on that list. And I was really excited to go to China and to be like, oh, yeah, I've been somewhere in China. And I know Shanghai is not necessarily representative, but it was fun to explore. So I think that's something that was also enjoyable, was just experiencing cold and like fall easing into winter temperatures. So it was like 10 degrees a lot of the time, Celsius for all you American listeners. And just getting to experience that right after being somewhere warm and right before going somewhere warm, it's kind of a fun experience. Even now, looking back on it, it's just interesting to be able to do something like that. Something that definitely stands out in terms of the city is just that Bund area and looking out at the skyline with all these amazing, gigantic, impressive skyscrapers. It's one of the coolest views we've seen, and we've seen some pretty amazing cityscapes. So that's definitely a standout. We ate some awesome food. What else? What stands out for you?
I think I would echo a lot of what you said. We ate great food, and definitely the Bund. I think the Bund area was a highlight for me because I've seen photos of the Shanghai skyline before, and every time I see it, it's like, oh, wow, like I need to go there. So it was cool to actually go there and experience that. And then I really loved going to the top of the World Financial Center and seeing how big the city is from the top of a really high building. I always think it's cool to get a perspective from above. And even though it took about a half an hour to walk from the Bund back to People's Square where we were staying, it was interesting from the top of that building being able to look and seeing how relatively close it was compared to other things in the city. Yeah,
the city just like literally looks like it goes on forever.
Yeah, I think some of the low points or the downsides of being in Shanghai were it's just having crappy internet. I think maybe the cold weather, although
it's a serious first world problem.
Yeah, the cold weather it's like always good to have perspective because we'd kind of been looking back at photos from people at home who were skiing and it's so beautiful in the mountains and it's like, oh, you kind of missed that. And then you remember that a picture does not by any means give you what the actual climate is like there. So we kind of were reminded of how cold it is at home and feeling a little bit grateful or a little bit more grateful to be abroad during this winter. I think.
But there was, on the flip side of being disconnected because of certain apps not working and just kind of generally being in China, it was kind of like liberating in a way. It was kind of a good reminder of what it felt like traveling in a previous backpacking trip where we haven't had any responsibilities or anything to do as much. It was kind of just fun. And being in China specifically, it felt like a bit more of like this experience of being dropped down somewhere where you really don't know what's going on. And you've kind of like in this almost like childlike state of like trying to figure things out and feeling a bit more foreign there than we had at other points in time so far since we've been traveling.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really great point. We talked about in our technology and travel episode how, we have unlocked iPhones, we can get SIM cards basically everywhere we go. It's like we have Uber. Travel has become a lot easier abroad. And I think that Shanghai was kind of like stepping into, our time in South America, our time in Southeast Asia last time where there's challenges because you're not always connected or you can't just hop on Google Maps and look something up. And I think that was definitely a good thing as much as like I found it a little bit frustrating to not have like good quality internet. I think that it was definitely a good reminder for us. It's like, oh, right. Okay. We can step back. We don't need to be connected all the time.
Yeah. And then a downside was, jumping from a warmer climate to a colder climate. We spent a lot of time walking around out in that cold weather, dealing with car exhaust and pollution and just a lot more people who were smoking. We both ended up getting sore throats and quite sick by the time we left after only 5 days.
Yeah, that was definitely a downside. I think that our bodies had spent a couple months in the warm weather, and it's always hard on your body to go from really warm weather to really cold weather back to really warm weather. And so we just got some common colds at the start of our time in Thailand. Obviously we healed up from those quite quickly. And I think something else that was kind of interesting is we took this like spur of the moment, like weekend 5-day trip to Shanghai. And we're like, oh, this will be like a fun adventure. Like we're not that sporadic. Let's be sporadic. And, it ended up being quite a dent in the whole wallet.
The old wallet?
Yeah, the old wallet. So looking back on it and knowing like how much it cost for flights and accommodation and then that extra flight hassle, Do you have any regrets about going to Shanghai?
I don't know if I'd term it as a regret, but it probably wasn't a smart decision. It was one of the situations where we're like, okay, like where can we go for a few days before just kind of like a stopover on the way to Chiang Mai? We look it up. The flights to Shanghai are super cheap. And we're like, oh, okay, start thinking about that idea. But by the time we actually committed to the idea, the flights had gotten more expensive. And then we didn't really look closely enough at the rules. So we find out, oh, the flight we booked doesn't actually work. Have to invest a few more $100s in it. And then when you're actually in Shanghai, it's not exactly a cheap place to be. If I had my thinking hat on at the time, I probably would have said, let's just go to Thailand and let's do a border run.
Right.
And then maybe we'll even stay in Thailand for longer.
Yeah, and probably spent a lot less money. I think, though, yeah, I agree with those points. And I think that Shanghai was a fun adventure, though. It's cool to, have this podcast episode. It's cool to have those experiences and to have those memories now. Yeah,
it's definitely a cool city and definitely worth checking out if you are in the
China area.
Yeah, I was like going to say that, and I was like, that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it is fun how you can just go there. So like if you're, for example, visiting Hong Kong and you're like, oh, I want to take a trip into China. Boom, fly to Shanghai. No visa necessary.
Yeah, double check that, though, depending on your nationality. The 144-hour transit visa does not apply to all nationalities.
Yeah.
So if you're American, Canadian, Australian, British, European, I'm pretty sure it applies to all of you, but just double check before you go and do that, because if you arrive in China and can't actually get in, or if you book a flight and go to the airport, they actually won't let you on your flight. So just do your research on that before you go. And yeah, we're going to post lots of photos from Shanghai, some links for places we ate and things we did on the show notes. So definitely check those out at www.theworldwanderers.com.
Until next time.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listener of the show. Something that's really important to us when making The World Wanderers is to make sure that we only partner with sponsors who we really know and love. And another way that our podcast is produced is through Patreon. Patreon is a crowd-based platform that allows people who enjoy the show to give a small amount of money each month in return for a little bit extra. So not only do they get the podcast, but they get fun rewards like ebooks and postcards from fun places and hangouts with us. So if you like the podcast and you want to support the ongoing production of The World Wanderers, head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanderers. Thanks so much for your support.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.